Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's Friends Life Care Vigor Wellness webinar, Have Your Cake and Eat It Too. My name is Katie Starantino, and I am the Director of Wellness Initiatives. Want to let you know that there's not a chat box for today's presentation, but we still encourage you to submit questions. And you can do that by clicking on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So just run your cursor over the bottom of the screen and you'll see a Q&A box icon. Click there and submit your questions, and we will check in with them at the end. So I'd now like to introduce Tim Zeigler and Clémence Scouten. Tim Zeigler has been a director of business development for Kamelot Auction House in Philadelphia since 2008. He is a certified senior advisor, lifelong auction enthusiast, and regularly speaks about auctions and downsizing. Tim presently serves on the board of directors for the Philadelphia State Planning Council, the Mainline Art Center, and the Mainline Chamber of Commerce. Tim is also an active Rotarian and is the current Chestnut Hill Rotary Club Foundation president. Tim regularly works with families and executors dealing with estate moving and downsizing, or looking to sell valuables or collections. He and his Kamelot team support clients selling throughout the auction process. Welcome, Tim, and that was quite a bio. You do a lot. And now we're going to move on to Clémence and tell you a little bit about her. As far as Clémence is concerned, there's no better project than a family history project. After graduating from the University of Pennsylvania with a BA in English, and then receiving an MA in English from the Sorbonne in Paris, she worked in corporate settings for 15 years in Boston, but something was missing. She started her business to help people curate and preserve their family history materials. Whether the end product is a memoir, family history book, or an archived collection, she helps families identify what is most important to them and deliver full service solutions. Thank you both for being here, and we look forward to learning from you today. I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. And I will be starting, and Clémence will be coming in after I have finished. So I am Tim Zeigler with Kamelot Auction House. I have been working for Kamelot since 2008. My role is to find and help the clients who have need to sell their valuables.
And I'm Clémence Scouten. I help families to make sure that all the stories they have, all the family history, all the traditions, the values, all that stuff makes it from one generation to the next by helping them publish books about it.
So as I said, I will be starting. An auction is selling through bidding. The auctions go back to the first recorded auctions were in 500 BC. We have clients at auctions who buy the items we offer, and we have clients who sell the items they offer. We don't own anything. We sell other people's items and work hard to find the best bids we can. But the auction house works for the seller. The agreement is between the auction house and the seller. So that's the quick overview of what an auction is and the relationships there. I always like to start off with something funny, and there's a classic auction story I'm going to tell you. One day a man went to an auction. While he was there, he bid on a parrot. He really wanted the parrot, so he got caught up in the bidding. He kept bidding, he kept bidding, he kept getting outbid, and a bidding war started, which is exactly what you want when you have an auction house. Finally, after he bid way more than he intended, he won the parrot. As he was paying for the parrot, he said to the auctioneer, "I sure hope the parrot can talk. I would hate to have paid this much for it only to find out he can't talk." "Don't worry," said the auctioneer. "He can talk. Who do you think was bidding against you?" So you always want to make sure you're doing your research before you are bidding on an item. And if it's a talking parrot, you want to make sure you don't run into that extra challenge. The question I most often hear asked about is, how did you get into the auction business? So I'm just going to real quickly talk about that. My father used to take me to auctions when I was a kid. I was 7, 8, 9 years old. He would take me along to pretend like he was helping my mother. My brother and sister would always complain when they went, but I loved it. I thought it was fun. It was a really exciting environment. Oh, I'm sorry, you can change the slide. It's always an exciting environment. And I would hear people saying, I wonder how much this is going to bring, or I hope I can get a good deal on this. My father only bought at auctions. I love the other side of it, selling. Something would go up for $5 or $10 and sell for $100, or go up for $20 or $30 and sell for $200. I thought that was the greatest thing ever. So I was sold on that. My father used to buy things and bring them home, and my mother didn't like him bringing things home all that much. So that was constant action at our home over the years. A quick story with my mom, who did not particularly like auctions. I was sitting a couple years ago having some breakfast with her, and she says, "Oh, I bought these juice cups at auction." I said, "Mom, I've been in this business a long time, and you never gave me an auction story. Tell me." Turns out that they were the first gift she had bought for her mother with her own money. She was 16 years old. She had made enough to buy these beautiful juice glasses, and she bought them for my grandmother, her mother. Well, as it turns out, after my grandmother passed, my grandfather decided to have an auction. They were from out of the area. I wasn't helping with it, but he didn't give them a chance, her or her brothers, a chance to take anything before he put it all up for auction. So she ended up bidding for it, and she ended up bidding 3 or 4 times more than she had originally paid for those. But she's very happy that she did. So that was kind of fun. I appreciate her having that story for me. What is the most surprising item is another question I get, or what is the most unusual item? And what's the most memorable item you've ever sold at your auction? Well, the answer to all of them is the same. A number of years ago, we sold something that was called a vampire hunting kit. It was a wooden case holding accessories for hunting vampires. And this traveling case had a crucifix, it had holy water, it had potions and daggers and a small pistol. It had a hammer, it had a book of prayers. It was kind of remarkable. We knew that things were older. We had not seen a vampire hunting kit before. And the way auction houses determine what an item is likely to bring and the estimates they put on is by looking at what things have sold in the past. So we couldn't find any history of a vampire hunting kit being sold at auction. It ended up bringing $12,500 from someone who bought it in Bridgewater. So if you're in Bridgewater at night, you might want to be careful in case he bought that for a reason. Another thing I want to just talk about with auctions is we never know what the winning bidder would have paid. It's a competitive environment. We don't know. If someone bought something for $5,000, we don't know if they would have gone higher. We know that the underbidder, the last bidder who was in the bidding along with the winning bidder, we know what their value is on it. We never know what it is. So the most important thing is gathering a lot of people together that are interested, getting the most interest you can in the items. And that's when we find out what is the value. We find that out on auction day, usually in about 30 seconds. Change the slide, Clémence. Thank you. When I was experiencing auctions with my father, there was 400 or 500 people usually at these auctions. They were often in auction galleries. Sometimes they were at someone's home, and there was no phone bidding. There was no, it was people bidding in person with paddles, and it was exciting. And in many cases, they were just raising their hand too. It just depended on which auction you were going at. Super exciting. Well, that's really changed. You would typically walk from item to item to see the item, or you would, they would hold the item up and announce it. Now, bidding is in person still when you're in a non-COVID environment. However, the primary bidding, 95 to 98% of the bidding, is through bidding by phone or bidding with bids that are left in advance, saying I'm interested in that item up to a certain amount. Bidding through the auction house's website, or bidding through multiple online bidding platforms. So there are multiple ways to bid, and most of the bidding is done on a cell phone or on an iPad or through the internet. Higher end auctions years ago, even 20 years ago, all had printed catalogs, and there are still printed catalogs showing the item and the estimate and a description at some auctions. But for the most part, they're now online, and you could see a series of pictures. You can ask for condition reports through that way too. You can find all kinds of ways to do it. So in terms of helping people at auctions, pictures, pictures, pictures. We used to have to go out and see every item in person. Now, through the ability to take pictures so easily and to send them by text or by email, working with an auction house has changed dramatically in that through pictures and through what you have available to send, you can get off to an awful good start before we even necessarily get started in terms of meeting you in that way. We can just kind of evaluate what's there. I would say change the slide again. So an auction house makes sense for, I jumped out a little bit, an auction house makes sense in a number of ways. Most of the clients that sell at auctions are dealing with an estate. So if there's an estate to sell, an auction house is a great way to sell those items efficiently. If someone's moving and downsizing, it's a great opportunity because you need to get rid of things quickly. A lot of times there's a settlement date there. Most auction houses will take the items in and store them for free and put them up for auction as you go along. So it's a quick answer too. Collections, it's a great way to sell collections. When you have hundreds of items or dozens of items, you attract a whole lot more collectors than if you're trying to sell just one. So it's great for collections. I also have a lot of clients I work with what I call stufficating. Stufficating is a word that just describes having accumulated or inherited so many things. It's filling the extra rooms of your house or garages and basements. And people that are stufficating may not be ready to move, but they're ready to free up some space. And sometimes they took these things in because they were owned by a relative or they thought they might have use for them. And there was a lot of emotion tied up, but 15, 20 years later, they would rather see those items go to someone else who can use them since they're not in a position to. Inherited items. Auction houses can help you identify your valuable items, and that's really a big effort. Typically, there's no charge for helping you identify your valuable items. If you're just looking to have someone do free appraisals, that's a whole nother ballgame. But if you're interested in selling something, you just want a sense of what it's worth, an auction house is a great way to do that. One other quick point I like to make is that for most of the clients we work with, the estates or the clients that are moving or downsizing, the top 5 or 6 items are often worth more than everything else combined. But the client won't always know what the most valuable item is. What was valuable in 1955 or 1975 or 1995 may not be valuable today. In some cases, it's an older item and you don't really even quite know what it is. Auction houses are a great way to help you then. The next thing I want to talk about, and I'm always asked, is what's hot and what's not. What's really hot right now in auction houses is mid-century modern furnishings. If you saw the show Mad Men, or you go back and look at it, the items they picture in the background, their art, their furniture, their rugs, all the furnishings, they are from the 1950s and 60s, and that is very, very hot. It's when I first started at Kamelot, we did maybe 40 or 50 offerings a year in mid-century modern. Now we have 8 or 9 dedicated auctions to mid-century modern and mid-century modern and modern design. What's not particularly hot? Pianos are not as hot as they used to be. It used to be everybody wanted a beautiful piano. Their children could take piano lessons. It was a nice piece of furniture. Well, now piano lessons, most children who take piano lessons start on a keyboard. The family doesn't already have a piano, and never necessarily evolves to the point where they want to buy a piano. So there's a lot of pianos coming on the market and less demand for them. Auction at the very heart of it is supply and demand. So those brings those values down. Armoires were really popular. We had big homes with not big closet space, and armoires were a beautiful way to store them. But all the homes you have that are being built for the last 30 years, probably a little longer, have lots of closet space. And there's whole companies that help you design your closet and to make more closets. And armoires kept their value during the 90s because we had these big giant televisions that we would put in them so we could hide the big televisions. Well, those are all gone now for flat screens. So The armoires that are out there just don't have a lot of value, and some of them have a hole in the back that was drilled so they could put the cord through. That doesn't help the value either. So armoires are much harder to, much less valuable than they were. Larger, darker items in antiques. Younger buyers seem to be buying things. They move more often. They are not buying homes as big as often. And the larger, darker antique items do not sell as well. Formal dining furniture and elements. There's not nearly as many formal dining rooms as they were, yet most every client I've worked with has downsized or is dealing with an estate had formal dining elements, all of them to sell. The dining room set, the crystal, the chandeliers, the china, all of it. For the most part, those items aren't selling particularly well. There's still some value to them. It's just often surprises the client. Silver is still doing well because silver value is good, and it's one of the elements that younger buyers seem to still like silver, but that's what's not selling. These are some examples of things that are pretty hot that we have sold recently. Up in the top there is a pair of French chairs from about 1940 by a well-known designer. Those are very popular. There's an iron and leather two-seat settee sitting in the second picture over at the top. And leather items, older leather items seem to be doing well. It's another item that we sold recently that was popular. And then there's a stick pin collection we sold. Estate jewelry is doing well. And that was a really wonderful opportunity we had to sell a stick pin collection. You can change the slide again. And here's some other items that we've done over the years, but you can get a sense of it. The bronze statues. Statues seem to be popular. There's a lithogram on the bottom that was from a famous artist that helped. And the two items in the top there, 19th century and giltwood Baroque style frames, those did very well also. So these are the kinds of things that we are seeing regularly. So just a reminder of what I was saying earlier is that when you are selling at auction, you're actually consigning your items for sale. The auction house doesn't take ownership of the item. They typically take control of the item and picture it and write the description up and usually bring it to their auction gallery to offer. But they're selling it on your behalf. It's not a consignment shop, but it is consigning, simply selling someone else's items without owning them. Once they're in the auction house, they are photographed, they're described by specialists who know what the item is. Estimates are put on them based on what things have sold, what these similar items have sold for recently over the last usually couple of years at other auction houses. Items are assigned to an auction in a way to try to attract the most bidders. That's the whole goal for an auction house, is to attract the most bidders and get the most possible money that they can. The auction house is working for the seller. At our auction house, we have the online catalog and the auctions up at least 3 to 4 weeks ahead of time. Buyers are typically from all around the world. Probably less than 5% of the buyers are coming in on site to look at the items. So they're mostly looking at the items through the pictures and descriptions and the condition reports they ask for. And we have buyers in every auction from all over the world and from all different levels, well outside the Delaware Valley. So it's not just the Delaware Valley, but it's the nation and the world. As I mentioned, there's bidding in all kinds of ways, both online, leaving bids in advance, and by phone, and in person during a non-COVID environment. And auction day is when we find out the value. And it has been great talking to you again today. I appreciate the opportunity, and if I can be of any help to you, I welcome it and look forward to the second part of this presentation with Clémence. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you, Tim. So Tim gives such a good explanation. My favorite's always the vampire hunting kit. I love hearing that story. But the problem is with all these objects is that most often they're very hard to let go of. And, the problem is because the whole reason we consider it to be valuable is because we assign it value. And often we assign it an emotional value that's not necessarily translatable into a financial value. And that's what makes it so hard to let go of. This picture on the screen right now, that's my grandmom's living room around the time I was born. And I'll tell you, that's an example of brown furniture, that huge hutch in the background. I don't know what Tim would have to say. And my bet is that these are one of the harder items to sell. But again, that's a question for Tim. But she used to photograph her furniture and put the photos of the furniture next to the photos of my cousins and me. That's how much she loved her objects. And that's kind of the theme for the second half of the presentation, which is what are the things we can do to memorialize the objects so that we can kind of let them go when we do have to downsize or things do have to be sold. So I recently read this book, A Gentleman in Moscow. I don't know if any of you have read it. If you're looking for something to read, I'd love this book. But as I was reading it, I came across this paragraph, and it's such a good description of our relationship with objects that I figured I'd throw it in here. So let me read it out loud real quick. We come to hold our dearest possessions more closely than we hold our friends. We carry them from place to place, often at considerable expense and inconvenience. We dust and polish their surfaces and reprimand children for playing too roughly in their vicinity, all the while allowing memories to invest them with greater and greater importance. This armoire, we're prone to recall, is the very one in which we hid as a boy. And it was these silver candelabra that lined our table on Christmas Eve. And it was this handkerchief that she once dried her tears, etc., etc. Until we imagined that these carefully preserved possessions might give us genuine solace in the face of a lost companion. But of course, a thing is just a thing. So what does that mean? What are we going to do now? As I said, these possessions, thing may just be a thing, except that's not really how we feel about them. And this attachment we have to items causes us to think that others are going to be as attached or love the objects as much as we do. And that's where the disconnect happens. That's why there's often tears when nobody wants the china from Grandma Betty, when you've loved these objects or these furniture, and the grandkids don't have the room or inclination to deal with large furniture in their center city walk-ups. Just very briefly, there are some economic expressions that have been coined in relation to our attachments to objects. So I don't know if you've heard of the endowment effect. The endowment effect is the term that was coined to describe the fact that we simply value our objects more because we own them, not for any real reason, just because the object is ours. So the stapler I have on my desk, that's my trusty stapler. I've had it since I started my business. I have a little story about the stapler. So for that, maybe let's say that stapler is worth $20, $25 maybe. But if my neighbor who has the same stapler and it's his trusty stapler, and he said, well, I'm selling my stapler, why don't you, I'll sell it to you for $25. I'm going to say, what are you kidding? That's worth 10. I can get that for 10, but somehow mine is worth more. That's the endowment effect, and it's very common. And it relates to loss aversion, this notion that we're going to give up an item for less than it's worth, right? This is the idea that it hurts more to lose $1 than to gain $1. So for instance, does this sound familiar to anyone? I have saved this object for you for 30 years. I know it's appreciated in value. How does Granny know that? I don't know. Has it appreciated in value? Who knows? But it has to her. And this is the kind of stuff we have to overcome when we're letting go of objects. And it's really hard. And of course, a lot of it has to do with the personal experience we had with the object. So what are the stories behind the object? Where was it acquired? Did you get it on your honeymoon? Was it a gift from someone? Did your mother-in-law give it to you at your wedding? All the the context around these objects is part of our relationship with them. In terms of their actual value, that's where the conflict arises. So as I mentioned, there are these practical considerations, like Tim was saying about closets and armoires. It's a mismatch now, right? It's a purely practical consideration. There was no conspiracy to end armoires. It just didn't work out that way for armoires. Another practical consideration is, what do you do to be equitable. Let's say you have two children and one piece of artwork that you want to give them. Well, you can't cut that in half. You can't split that equitably. You would have to sell it and then maybe, give each of the children, 50% of the cash. But what happens when, there's this object that you want to pass on or that both children want? That's something that happens quite a bit. And just a quick word about the storage industry, which is, it kind of blew my mind to find out how big that industry is. $33 billion in annual revenue from everyday people who think that they need to put something in storage for 6 months to get us through the move, or a year, while we go through this transition, and then it turns into 5 years, it turns into 10 years, and the cost you spent on storage vastly exceeds the cost of every item in storage. So I have a beef with the storage industry because I don't, it's just too much. It's suffocating. Instead of getting rid of the stuff properly by selling it with Tim or giving it away or whatever it is, we put it in storage. And that's why it's a $33 billion industry. So where does that leave us? What can we do to help us get rid of these objects? Well, this is what I'm suggesting you think about if it's useful to you. You can make a book. You can print a photo book. I'm sure you've seen photo books that are generated on Snapfish or Shutterfly or Mixbook, or there's a whole bunch of these photo book printers available online. It's very reasonably priced and it's really easy to use. And so what you can do is say, okay, well, if we've got to get rid of this stuff, but there are lots of stories here that I want to document, not to mention the provenance of materials. Tim didn't talk about this much, but provenance is a big thing with items. If it came from someone famous, if it has a particularly interesting history, that actually impacts the value of items. So you can capture all that in a book next to the picture of the item. So you have to ask yourself a couple questions, of course, when you're preparing to make the book. Are you going to do a book of all your furniture, of your art, of your jewelry? Are you going to make one book with all of that stuff in it? You certainly can. It depends on how much stuff you have. What kind of narrative are you going to write? Are you going to talk extensively about these items? Are you going to be very academic about it and chart the history of every item? Or maybe just write a little paragraph or even just a short caption? Why are you writing the book? Who's it for? Is it for your kids? Is it for you? There's nothing wrong about creating a book like this just for you. I met a woman who did one of these for her children, and she hasn't even given it to them yet because she actually really enjoys reading about her items. And how fancy is this book going to be? Well, that's simply a question of what kind of printer are you going to use, and are you going to have any high-end finishes, which is an option. But however you decide to print it, if you're going to do this type of book, I would say the best way to stay on track and not get discouraged and not get bogged down is just to be well organized about it. So, there are really two ways to go about photographing the items or determining what goes in the book. The first one is simply to gather everything you want to photograph and put it in one room and then just systematically take the pictures. So if you're going to do all your jewelry, go to the bank, get the safety deposit box out, get the jewelry, get the stuff you have in your bedroom, and maybe there's stuff, I don't know, hidden in the closet. So get it all together and then photograph it and put it back. The other option, because jewelry is easy to move around, but furniture and artwork is not, just systematically go through each room in the house. What's on the shelf? What's on the wall? What's hanging from the ceiling? Is there a chandelier, which you're very attached to, but nobody else wants? Those are the items you can photograph. And I encourage you to keep a pen and paper handy as you're going through so that you can jot notes down to yourself. Because if you're going to write a little paragraph about these items or a couple sentences, walking through the house and remembering the items will jog your memory. And it's much easier to write down a little note about a memory you had than to try and remember it 3 days later and get really aggravated because you can't. So, all right, photography tips. Well, the nice thing is that smartphones today have such powerful cameras in them that you actually don't have to worry too much about creating the perfect environment for photographs. Lighting helps. So if you are able to take the photographs in a spot that has good lighting, that will make a more detailed photograph. Backgrounds help. So I don't know if you have a nice big dining room table where you can place objects and photograph them. If not, maybe your desk, that would also be a good place, so that they have a nice simple background and aren't competing for attention with other objects. But even then, it doesn't really matter if you have a bunch of stuff on a shelf, and you don't want to move everything and it's not convenient for you, just take a picture of the shelf. Especially maybe if the stuff on the shelf is part of a collection and all looks better together. There's no right or wrong way to do this. It's just how, what do you feel is showing these objects in the best light? I encourage you to take multiple pictures of each of the items, so then try different angles and different lighting, so that then you can pick the best photograph. Now, you have this all done. You've gotten all your photographs, you've jotted all your notes. The next step is to really, and this goes back to the theme of staying organized. The next step is really just to plan the order of the photos, if there is one. So for instance, if you're doing a big book with furniture and artwork and jewelry, let's say, then you're going to have an order for the photographs. You're not necessarily going to have a picture of the couch on page 1 and a picture of a pearl necklace on page 2. You may choose to organize it, but just do that before you start designing, because it saves you time in the long run. You're going to want to pick a title for the book. So is it, the Jones family, a book of objects? Is it objects from 8419 Shawnee Street? You don't have to have a title, but titles are nice. So you may want to think about that. Be sure to write your captions and your stories. I know you were taking notes right all along, but now that it's time to think about the book, type up this stuff in a Word document before you start designing the book. A lot of the photo books have spell check built in, so you could certainly type stuff directly into the, to the Shutterfly or to the mix book. But the spell check in Microsoft Word works much better. And you probably also have a comfort level with Microsoft Word because it's been around for so long than with a book design software if it's the first time you're using the book design software. So take a little time just to write out your stories and proofread them and make sure they say what you want before you design the book. And this is also the time for you to think about what kind of intro pages, front matter you want for your book. Do you want a title page? Do you want a dedication, an introduction? Why are you doing this? Should there be a timeline that if you have some really old objects coming from far back in the family, is it worth doing a little timeline showing the people who left those objects down for future generations? I'm not saying you have to do any of this stuff, but if you're going to do a book and you think it's kind of cool and you get into it, you think it's kind of cool to make sure that you're stating why and you're doing this and the history of the objects. These are all perfectly normal front matter items to consider. But again, just do it before you start designing the book on the internet, because it's much harder to move pages around than you wish it would when it comes time to. So where to go online to design these books? I really say if you've done a photo book before and you have a comfort level with one of the websites that exist, like mixbook.com, like blurb.com, Shutterfly, there's a whole bunch of them. You can go back to that one and do it there, because if you know how to use it, there's no reason to learn another one. If you've never done it before, the one I really like is forever.com. They have excellent privacy standards and great customer service. Their customer service actually responds to you if you need something. But again, Shutterfly does a good job. Mixbook has good customer service too. And so it really is just a question of what's easiest for you. With forever.com, you just create an account. It's a free account. All these services offer free accounts. And you have two options. You can design the book from scratch, place the photos where you want, or you can use one of their templates. The templates are nice because they're designed by professional designers. So when you use one of their templates, the book has some level of flair that most of us naturally don't know how to produce. And don't be too hard on yourself in that regard. We're not trying to print a coffee table book that's going to somehow make it to the New York Times bestseller list. That's not what this is about. It's about creating something meaningful for your family and for yourself. So, if you're worried that it's not pretty enough, or the pictures aren't perfect enough, or I'm worried there's going to be a spelling mistake, just try not to focus on that too much. I think the book is going to be better than you think it is. However, there's nothing stopping you from seeking inspiration in some of the books you already have. If you have a coffee table book you really like, take a look at what fonts they use. How big are their margins? How big is the font? Is it printed in small print or large print? Again, there's no right or wrong answer, but by the way, I print everything in large print now. I get so aggravated when people print books and pamphlets and the writing is like causing me strain. So my last piece of advice in terms of book design and selecting the website you're going to use to design your book is to wait for a sale. All the websites I mentioned, Mixbook, Shutterfly, Snapfish, Forever, they all run sales all the time. So unless you're working with a deadline, design your book and then just wait for that little email to show up in your inbox saying, today only 30% off or whatever it is. And then you just log into your account, hit buy on the book, and you get your 30% discount. All right, so here's a little example of a book I designed just for the purpose of showing you what it could look like. This one's from forever.com. And I don't know if you can read the print here. I just took a picture of a piece of artwork that's on the wall. It's some random extended family member I've never met who painted it. It's a watercolor. And I just drafted a sample introduction of what something could sound like in this type of book. We wanted to share with you some photos of the art and objects that have a special meaning to us. Some of them are worth real money. Some of them have deep sentimental value, but no financial value. As hard as it is to let go of some of these items, we know we can't keep everything and that you do not necessarily have room or desire to have these in your own home. We hope that this book will help you remember the house you grew up in and know a little bit more about what mattered to us and why. Love, Mom and Dad. And so here we go to the next page. So this is the china from Grandma Betty Jones. And we have a picture of the china. And by the way, not a terrific picture, right? Everything's kind of rick-a-rack. There's stacks. You don't really have a sense of scale. But you definitely understand what the object is. And with the paragraph below, you explain the object. This set of china came to us via Grandma Betty when she passed away in '69. It's a full set of 12 dinner plates, salad plates, dessert plates, teacups and saucer, 3 serving dishes of soup, a soup bowl with matching ladle. It's not dishwasher safe, and we use it only for special occasions. So by the way, I made that entire statement up. This is not china that is in my family. I don't know where it came from. It's just to give you an idea of the type of thing you could say about the object, where it came from, what it is, and just practical, useful advice. It's not dishwasher safe. Which, by the way, is probably why nobody wants it. And we only use it for special occasions. Here's another example. So here's a sofa from Uncle John. Uncle John gave us this sofa when we were married in 1952. It was a wedding gift and the first piece of nice furniture we owned. We had it reupholstered in 1975 when we discovered Jenny had been using the back of the cushions as a canvas for her artwork. By the way, that's a real life story. I drew on the back of my mother's white couch, thinking I would never be discovered when I was 7 years old. I still remember the fallout from that idea. Anyway, we spent many nights on the sofa watching TV with the kids when they were little. Our favorite shows to watch were Bonanza and The Honeymooners. So I made up this, this paragraph about the sofa, except the part about coloring on the back of the cushions. Just again, to give you an idea of the type of thing one could say about the object. Obviously, everybody has a different approach to this, and everybody has a different story for whatever objects they care about. But this is just one example of how you could do it. So there you go. That's what I had to say, and Tim shared with you what's on his mind. I think now's about the right time for us to take questions.
Great, thank you so much. So I will ask everyone again. You'll see at the bottom the Q&A box, so feel free to put your questions in there. We'll give you a minute. I had a question for the two of you. I mean, I think a lot about the environment and how maybe reusing these things is helpful or not. I don't know if that brings anything up for you.
Oh, absolutely. I think the auction industry is one of the greenest industries there are. selling things for exactly the same purpose they were originally intended and extending their life. So we are naturally green, and that is wonderful, and it feels good to be working in that kind of an industry.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. Okay, don't see any questions coming in. We'll give another moment. I'm just going to remind everyone that you will get a follow-up email with a link to a recording of the webinar today, so you can share it, watch it again. That link will also have some resources from Tim and Clémence for you, so check that out. Our next webinar will be on November 4th at 11 a.m. It's called Understanding Memory, How It Works and What to Do When It Doesn't. So I see a question here, 2 questions. Okay, somebody says, I have some coins, mostly silver dollars. Is there a way I can find the value?
There's certainly a lot of coin specialists that you can have look at it. Auction houses can look at it. There's a lot of ways to find the value. You can do your own research if you're so inclined online, but I don't have a great site that clients have used for that. Typically, they like to have someone who knows what it is take a look at it. So I have specialists I refer to for that. I'd be happy to help someone, or find someone that does that for a living and that someone has recommended. There are certain in any part of this resale market, there's certain ones that are more consistently treating the customer fair than others. So I always like having a recommendation for someone rather than just they seem nice and friendly.
Thank you. Our next question, what happens if the item is not sold at auction? Can there be a contingency for just getting rid of the item?
We have an option. Auction houses handle this differently. We have an option for our clients that if it doesn't sell at an auction for us the first time, we will often reoffer it. If for some reason we're wrong and we took an item that just doesn't make sense for our auction house, and we can't get something for it, we will find another outlet for the client if that's what they want. It's part of the option they have in working with us to say, hey, we don't want it back. We want you to sell it some other way if auction doesn't make sense. Or doesn't work in this case. So, or you're welcome to have it back. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, great. This question for Tim. You mentioned that people usually send you photos first, but most people don't know what might be valuable. So where do we start?
Sometimes we suggest photos of a whole room, photos of just getting a sense of what it is. If I can't tell you how many times there'll be something sitting on a coffee table that one of our specialists is looking at in a picture, and they say, that's not bad, but boy, what a phenomenal rug. Well, the rug was in the background. They can't help themselves. They look for whatever else is there. So we kind of walk you through that, and each case is different. Part of why this is fun is it's not cookie cutter. Each case is different. So, we try to find the background. Where did it come from? If it's been around for a long time, that tells us something. If you bought it at IKEA, we probably can't help you, but it just all depends. So the best thing to do is to reach out to someone and let them get started with you.
Okay. Our next question here. Thank you, everyone. You're sending great questions. What is the difference between auction houses and estate sale companies?
Estate sale companies are usually selling something on site, and they are selling to the people that are going to kind of come in there and buy it. So their reach tends to be 10 or 15 miles. Some of them are doing something else, but auction houses are selling and promoting to people, if they're doing it the way we do, they're promoting to local buyers, regional buyers, buyers nationally and internationally, and promoting the auctions that way with a lot of online bidding. Estate sales are starting to get into that, but typically for certain kinds of items, estate sales are better. Typically, lower priced items that are under $1,000, I would say. Though it all depends on the estate company. But I believe your auction house is your best bet for that. Before I was in the auction industry, I would sell through auction earlier than I would sell something through an estate sale.
Great. Our next person actually is giving a comment probably to the person who was asking about coins. So if you're the person that asked that question, you might want to listen here that Edelman's in Jenkintown is a great source of information about coins and stamps, and they have a good reputation. So we hope that helped the person asking that. Our next question, I think, Clémence, this is probably for you. I have scanned all our old family photos from the 1800s on. The originals are, of course, fragile, but I just can't throw them away. Any ideas?
Sure. First of all, congratulations on scanning all that, because scanning is not, everybody can hear me, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Scanning is not actually all that exciting. So congratulations on doing it. The items that you now have, there are a couple different things you can do. If part of the goal is to extend their life and keep them going as long as they can, consider purchasing archival materials and filing these original photos in the proper archival storage boxes. You can go. I have an how to archive guide on my website. Library of Congress has a ton of information on archiving, but gaylord.com is a source for buying archival materials. They're real nice people. You can call them up and tell them about your project. They'll make the appropriate suggestions for which materials you should buy for your project, since we don't know what kind of size photos you have. Separately, if you actually are eager to not have them in your house anymore, you might get lucky with a historical society. If this is a family in Pennsylvania from the 1800s, the Historical Society of Pennsylvania might be interested. If it's, I don't know if it's from somewhere else, or if there's something particular about your family, if they were all in the same specialty, if they all did the same, business or something, you might have a specialty association that would be interested in preserving these materials as part of their archive. So donation is an option. And then it may be that somebody else, it sounds like, Donna, you may be the family historian, and that's why they're in your possession. It's not too early to search for the next generation of who might like to own those items. So that is also an option. But since you've scanned them, the other idea would be to make sure you share those scans if you're interested in sharing them with the family. Forever.com is great for photo sharing. Smugmug.com is also great for photo sharing. So there you go.
Great, thank you. Our next question, I have a mechanic's barn of multiple tools and large items such as engine lift, tanks, etc. I've been trying to sell piecemeal via Craigslist, but now it's just time to get them moving. How can these be sold via online auction?
The best thing to do is to reach out to an auction house that does those types of items regularly and connect with them. They're probably going to ask you to provide the information you know about them, provide some pictures, and begin that conversation. That's the best way. And if for anybody that's on this call, if they would like to reach out to me, I will be happy to guide them for any items that we don't specifically take.
Great. We have another one. Hypothetically, if an auction house sells an item for $100, what is the net the seller receives? In other words, how much does the auction house keep?
That's it. It's a negotiation. Each case is different. Auction houses have different. It's kind of like a realtor. You typically see 6%, but sometimes it's 7%, sometimes it's 5%. Our standard schedule runs between 10 and 25%, depending on how much the items bring. So that's the percentage that the auction house gets for the commission. There are auction premiums involved in auction too, and that's not paid by the seller, that's paid by the buyer. So that varies as well. Our auction premium is 25%. So someone who bought something for $10,000, they would be paying $12,500. Typically on something like that, there might be a commission of a single-digit commission, probably 5%.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. We had a number of questions about that, so I hope that answered everybody's question. Okay, so we're just going to do 3 more questions. How do we find out if a particular auction happens at particular times? I worry that my items may be auctioned when few people come to the auction. It is hard to have a bidding war if few people come.
Well, I mean, the auction house's job is to attract those bidders. One of the reasons we have our auctions out there 3 to 4 weeks ahead is so they can be promoted. And we spend quite a bit of money promoting every auction. Our job is to line up every bidder we can find, and then you find out in 30 or 40 seconds what those interested bidders are interested in buying. I would suggest, if you're concerned specifically about it, do a little background on the auction house and watch one of their auctions, see how it works out. Get familiar with them ahead of time. But reach out to an auction house and talk to their representatives and let them help you be comfortable with how it works. If you haven't bought at auction and you haven't sold at auction before, it is a new experience, and we are really used to working with new people that are trying to figure it out. What's beautiful about it is you're bringing everybody that the auction house can attract and giving them a chance to bid, and they're literally bidders from the local area, the region, and around the world. And that sense of urgency really pushes the price for those people that are interested. And that's why you see these stunning results sometimes.
Okay, I'm just going to do our last two questions here. Clémence, are old photos more valuable if the people in them are identified, or does it matter? I have 2 albums beautifully made in the late 1800s with no identifying information. No one in the family knows who it is.
Sure. I would say that if you have, and this is probably not the case because you're telling us that you don't know anybody in the photos. If it's a photo of a famous person, obviously that's going to impact the value. If it's a photo of someone who's not super famous, but who is relevant for some other reason, and it probably doesn't increase the financial value, but it may increase the how much that object is desired. So for instance, if you have, I don't know, if someone in these photos was a local politician from 100 years ago, that's very interesting for historical society, even though the price of the actual price of what that photo is worth isn't really impacted. The Historical Society of Pennsylvania and others, other organizations like that, offer classes on how to work on identifying people in photos. You're not alone with this problem, and there are strategies to try and do this. By identifying, I'm not good at this, I don't specialize in this, but you can identify key markers of what's in the picture and the clothing, and really narrow in not just on a century, but on a decade. And by doing that, then you can match it up with your family tree, and by process of elimination, you can hone in on who might be in the photograph. So there's definitely strategies and techniques for that. HSP and others offer classes in this. I hate to see those photographs and those albums be chucked, because someday somebody may come along with a passion for identifying people in photos and actually unlock that puzzle. I'm not that person, and like someone else in this list of questions, I'm the last in line in my little family tree. So maybe I should throw mine away, but it's very hard, and I don't recommend it. It feels icky inside when you do that.
And if the picture is of someone historic, I mean, we've recently sold pictures of Albert Einstein and Marilyn Monroe. I mean, if you have somebody that is in the picture, that particular subject matter is popular, you can do it. I mean, one way to check out what anything is bringing, you just go online and type in what it is and see what pops up if you're trying to buy it. You'll see auction houses, you'll see all kinds of other ways of doing it. But if the photo has someone famous in it, you might be able to sell it as well.
Mm-hmm. And to that point, we have somebody who wants to share that if you are doing photo identification, you have to write on the reverse of, the photo, use a pencil lightly, because ink will bleed through, smear or transfer. So thank you for sharing that.
That's very wise advice.
Yes.
That.
So I have 2 questions left, because Joan just got one in at the last minute. I want to make sure that we get that in, but these will be our last ones. So suggestions for what to do with photos and military documents if I'm the last person, to kind of deal with Yeah,
those are real hard situations. I don't have a great suggestion for you. If they're historical photos that may have some historical value, I think, again, consider, if a local institution may be interested. If the photos are thematic, again, there may be some association that it relates to that would be interested. Same thing for military documents. If it pertains to your service in a conflict, it may be that you can find a group that would be interested in those materials. But otherwise, it's a very bleak suggestion. And I don't like to recommend people just to chuck things, but sometimes that is the reality.
All right, our final one here, Tim, for you. Can you put a minimum amount of a sale on the item in an auction?
Yeah, it's called a reserve. And auction houses do that in different ways. At our auction house, we have a house reserve of half the low estimate. So if an item was being offered and we estimated it was bringing $4,000 to $6,000, we would automatically not have a reserve of $2,000 on that item. So but we wouldn't even take a bid that if it didn't start at least $2,000. The trick with reserves is you don't want to make them too high and you don't make the auction estimates too high, because the whole enthusiasm with auction is getting people and bidders involved. And when you make those numbers too high, that you tend not to get as much involvement. In Pennsylvania, you can put a reserve as high as what your low estimate is. So my example of $4,000 to $6,000, you would be allowed to do a reserve of as much as $4,000, but no higher.
Well, these were some wonderful questions, and you'll see Clémence and Tim's contact right up here if you want to ask some more. And like I said, you can look out for that email with the recording and also some resources they've put together for you. We hope to see you at our next webinar on November 4th. And thank you both for your time.
Katie, somebody just popped up with 2 excellent suggestions. Can you just read them real quick?
Sure, yes, okay. I have a suggestion for the military documents. So the person that was asking that question. The Holocaust Museum accepted this person's father's uniforms, medals, and photos from Nuremberg. So that was great. And then pictures can be put on Ancestry, and if trees are public, people can see them, including the military stuff. So that's great. Thank you for our viewers for helping with that. That's wonderful. All right, thank you all for being here. Take care, and we will see you next month. Bye-bye.